Welcome to the Wing Wag. I'm your host, Jack O'Lynn. I'm an instrument-rated pilot and the owner of an aviation company and flight school here in Central Florida.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not guaranteed to be accurate or complete. While we research each topic, we are humans and occasionally make mistakes. For the most up-to-date information on regulations, check out the official Federal Aviation Regulations, also known as the FARs, or consult an aviation attorney. Lastly, the opinions expressed on this podcast are the guest's opinions and are not necessarily the opinions of the host or podcast. Welcome to this week's episode. Today I wanted to talk about aviation medical certificates. This is something that if you're a pilot or you know a pilot or you're a student pilot, I'm sure you've heard about, and maybe you're stressing about it because it can be stressful. But it's something that we definitely need to talk about. It can be a little bit boring, but like I said, most pilots are going to need one of these, and there's a lot of incorrect information online, and I've heard lots of incorrect advice personally. And so I wanted to do an episode going over some of the details, some of the important facts about medical certificates. In particular, our last video about how to choose a flight school, we received a couple of questions and comments about medical certificates, and some of them did contain incorrect information. So the first thing that we'll do is let's talk about the different types of medical certificates that are available to you as a pilot. There are four main types. There's the three standard ones, the first, second, and third class medical certificates, and then there's a fourth one called Basic Med. And each of these medical certificates comes with a list of requirements, like physical requirements that you must meet in order to have that medical certificate. They come with restrictions on what you cannot do under that, and privileges, what you can do under that medical certificate. They also have different durations. Different medical certificates last for different amounts of time. And what kind of pilot you want to be, commercial pilot, airline pilot, just flying for fun, flying experimentals, that will determine which type of medical certificate you should get. So the three basic ones we were talking about were the first, second, and third class. We'll start with third class because that is the standard medical certificate that probably most pilots have. And if you're a student pilot, it's generally the medical certificate that you're going to get first. Maybe later you'll upgrade it, but that's the entry point for medical certificates is the third class. So some basic items. The third class medical is, like I said, the standard general aviation private pilot medical certificate. It lasts for 5 years if you are under 40, and I believe it lasts for 2 years if you're above 40. It allows no commercial activity except for flight training. So that is the one exception to the no commercial activity, is if you are a flight instructor, you can instruct on a third class medical. But other than that, you may not fly for hire in any way. Yes, this has that restriction, but this is the easiest medical certificate to get. So in general, for the actual exam, they're going to test your vision, your hearing, your ear, nose, and throat, your blood pressure, your mental status, and any substance dependence. Like, are there any medications that you're taking? And in reality, all of the medical certificates are going to test these areas to some degree with just more strict thresholds, depending on which class of medical certificate you're trying to get. So I'm not going to get into like the exact details of what you like, how good your eyesight needs to be and how good your hearing needs to be for each of these. You can look that up online. That's freely available. I'm also not going to just read from the FARs. So just keep that in mind. These are just overall guidelines. So that's your third class medical. Then if you want to fly for hire, you can upgrade your third class to a second class medical certificate. The second class medical certificate grants you all of the privileges of the third class, except you are now allowed to fly for hire in all situations except you cannot fly as an airline pilot. So you could do banner towing, you could do ferry flights, things like this, where people are paying you to fly, but you're not carrying passengers, basically. And because this comes with more privileges, it's also more restrictive. They require sharper vision, so the vision tests are more strict. And also the duration is less than a third class medical. If you remember, the third class medical lasted for either 2 or 5 years, depending on if you were above or below 40. The second class medical lasts for 1 year. And what happens if you let your second class medical expire? If you let your second class medical expire, it reverts to a third class for the remainder of that duration. For example, if you're below 40, if you have a second class medical, it lasts for 1 year. If it expires, then you still have 4 years of a third class medical left. So then we move on to the first class, which, as you can guess, adds on the ability to be an airline pilot. But as you can imagine, is even more difficult to get. In order to get the first class medical, you'll need to pass all of the tests of the third and the second class medicals. In addition, you'll need to do some heart testing. And you are only eligible for a first class medical if you are below 65 years old. So if you're above 65, you cannot even get a first class medical. And the duration is even shorter. So if you're below 40, the first class medical lasts for 1 year. If you're above 40, it lasts for 6 months. And just like with the second class medical, if you let it expire, it'll revert to a second class for the remainder of that duration. And if you let that expire, it'll revert to a third class. And if you let that expire, it's expired. So the last one we haven't talked about is basic med. So what is basic med? Basic med is a program to help people fly who either don't want to go through the medical process or are worried that they might not pass a medical anymore. So in order to be eligible for basic med, you have to have had a medical certificate at some point in the past. It can be expired, but you need to have passed the last medical exam that you did. So for example, if you had a third class medical and then you let it expire, you are eligible for basic med. So if you had a third class medical, you passed the examination, you got your medical, but then you went to renew it after 2 or 5 years and you failed that exam, you are now not eligible for basic med until you go back and pass the exam one more time. So you needed to pass your last medical exam in order to be eligible for basic med. So once you're eligible for basic med, you'll just need to take an online course every 24 months, and you'll need to go visit a normal doctor, not necessarily an aviation medical doctor, but just a normal doctor, and have them provide a note saying that there is nothing that they know of that would disqualify you from flight, and that needs to be done every 4 years. So that is a really, really nice option for just private pilots that are flying for fun. It does come with further restrictions, like, let's see, you have to fly airplanes under 12,500 pounds with 7 seats or fewer. Your airplane cannot be faster than 250 knots, and you're restricted to altitudes below 18,000 feet. But that's actually not that restrictive. That is the vast majority of general aviation airplanes, like Cessna 172, Cessna 182, all of our airplanes, for example. And I'll say I currently have a third class medical, but when this one expires, I think I'm just going to stick with basic med, unless for some reason I decide I want to start flying for higher. But it's just so much easier, and it's not really that restrictive as I was just talking about. So we've gone over the basic types of medical certificates. Let's get into the weeds a little bit about like the process of getting it, how you get it. Are there situations when you don't even need a medical certificate? Actually, maybe we'll start with that one. So, are there situations when you don't need a medical certificate? Yes, so there are some situations when you do not need one of these 4 medical certificates. In particular, the big one is if you want to be a sport pilot, you do not need a medical certificate, but you do need a valid US driver's license. And there might be a requirement, like there was for basic med, to meet with a normal doctor on some regular schedule. I don't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, this is another great option if you don't think you can pass a medical or don't want to go through that process, especially because if you listen back to our Mosaic episode, the expansion of light sport has made the sport pilot's license a lot more like powerful than it used to be. You can do a lot more with a sports pilot license than you could in the past. So that's really cool. You can fly with just the driver's license instead of a medical certificate. One caveat of that is if you decide to get a medical certificate, and just like with basic med, if you fail an exam, you are not eligible to fly without a medical under a sport pilot's license. If you want to fly sport pilot using just your driver's license, you either have to never have taken the medical examination or you need to have passed your last one, right? So a failed medical makes you ineligible for basic med or flying under a driver's license until you correct it. And that is a big deal. And so you might have heard that failing a medical is a really big deal, and we don't want to fail a medical at all costs. And so we'll talk about that in a second. So first, we'll talk about what is the process of getting a medical certificate. It's actually really easy. You just look up AMEs in your area, and an AME is a aviation medical examiner, I believe. There's generally a few of them in every city, and then you call them up, schedule an appointment, you go there for an hour, they do these tests, and that's that. And they give you your medical certificate. And then once you have it, you need to have that with you whenever you fly. It's one of the required documents if you're flying in a situation where you need a medical certificate at all. When do you need it? So there's this misconception that you need to get a medical certificate before you start flight training, but that's actually not true. You can fly with your instructor as a student pilot without a medical certificate, but you cannot solo. So in general, I would recommend that you actually do not get the medical certificate at the start. I would wait until you've met your instructor and you've done a couple of lessons with your instructor. One, so you can talk about your options. Like maybe you decide that sport pilot is what you want. You had started a private pilot program not knowing exactly what you wanted, and then you decide a sport pilot is the way to go. Then don't even bother taking the medical. Just use your driver's license from the start and don't risk having a failure on your record, right? And so it definitely makes sense to at least do a couple of flights with your instructor first and talk through your goals. So let's say you start your flight training, you talk with your instructor, you want to go the private pilot route, you definitely want your third class medical, you're interested in a career, so maybe you'll get a second or a first class later in the future. How should you prepare for the examination? So one option, if you're pretty sure you're healthy and that you're going to pass everything, you can just not prepare and just go. That's what I did for my first one. And like looking back, I'm kind of horrified that I did that. But yeah, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't. But you could just do that. A good rule of thumb is you should go to your primary care doctor maybe a month or two before, let them know, hey, I'm going to be doing this. This is what they look for. Can we talk about some of these? And then so the doctor will maybe do some of the tests. Maybe they're familiar with this examination. And so you can talk through areas where you'll definitely pass or areas where maybe there might be some issues. And then I would also go see your eye doctor because vision is such a big part of the aviation examination. I would talk to the eye doctor and make sure that you are up to the threshold for getting your medical certificate. And if you are not, because you'll be able to see, like there are strict guidelines. Like for the third class, I think you have to be able to see 20/40 at a minimum. And so if you do the medical test with your eye doctor and you find that you are below that threshold, then don't even go take the medical exam until you've addressed that problem. Make sure your glasses are up to date. Get glasses if you need them, contacts, whatever, until your vision is above the threshold. And you can, if you need corrective lenses, glasses, you can wear glasses for your aviation exam, but then you'll just have a restriction that you always need to wear glasses when you fly, which is not a big deal at all. Especially vision is very important to flying, and we don't want to like cheat the medical system, right? You want to be safe to fly. And so if you require glasses to be safe, then that's what you require. So meeting with the eye doctor beforehand can help you to be prepared to pass that medical exam and fly safe. You can also kind of outsource the eye exam entirely to your eye doctor. I'm not entirely sure how this works because I haven't done this yet. I'll probably do this for my next one if I decide not to go the basic med route. So you meet with your eye doctor, you tell them what you're doing, and there's a specific form that they need to fill out. And then you can bring that form to your aviation exam, and then they'll skip the eye test and just take that. And I think that's a really good way of doing it. The eye doctor, like that's their whole job, right? They're experts on eyes, and you'll probably get a more comprehensive test that way. And then it also gives you that peace of mind. You won't have to go into the aviation exam not sure whether you're going to pass or fail the vision part. You've already passed or failed, and if you failed, just go do it again. Don't risk a failure on the actual medical exam. So all this to say, all this preparation, when you go into a medical certification, a medical exam, you want to be sure that you're going to pass. You want there to be no question that you're going to pass. So when you meet with your primary care physician, if there's anything that's like that you think could be a gray area where you might pass, might not pass, another thing you can do that's really good is you can reach out to the AME that you'll be testing with, and you can say, hey, I'd like to do a consultation. And so in the consultation, you'll meet with them. It's not an official exam, so you won't be going through the tests, but you'll lay out some of the gray area issues that you might have. And like, for example, it might be you're taking a medication for something and you're not sure whether this medication is going to be allowed in the dosage that you're taking it maybe. So you meet with the AME and you explain, okay, I'm on this medication for this problem. This is how long I've been taking it. This is how long I plan to take it. This is my dosage, whatever. And then you and the AME can go and decide whether that's going to would cause a failure or not during a real test. And if they say, no, I think that's not a problem, then you can go and say, okay, well then I'd like to do the real test and then go through it. Whereas if they say, yeah, I don't know, I think this could cause a failure, then you're like, okay, thank you, go back, we'll address this problem. Maybe there's another way you can fix your medical problem that doesn't involve this drug. I don't know, something like this. But either way, it's a really good idea to meet with the AME first for a consultation that's not official, that's not an official exam, just to discuss what the exam will look like in your particular case. So you've gone through all this preparation, and it looks like you're not going to pass your medical. You did a consultation, and for some reason or another, there's something that's going to keep you from obtaining the medical certificate. What are your options? So the easiest option is just don't get a medical, right? Pick a path, pick a flight path that just involves flying under a valid US driver's license, right? Sport pilot. I think actually balloons and gliders fall under this too, where you can use just your driver's license. So if you just wanted to fly for fun, maybe that's the easiest way. If you were dead set on a career and you need that medical, you can meet with your normal doctor, explain the situation, and try to come up with a plan to pass. Like maybe it's something fixable, like your eyesight. get glasses. Or maybe it's something like your blood pressure is too high, then maybe you work out like a workout and diet plan with your doctor or nutritionist or something, or a trainer, and try to get those down into the acceptable range before you go in for an actual test. But maybe it's something that you can't fix. Then you have one other option. You can apply for a special issuance. So this is it's basically an exception. Like, you think that you're an exception. You can still fly safely with whatever your problem is that would normally cause you to fail the exam. And it is handled on a case-by-case basis. So I think that the thing about flying with glasses technically is a special issuance, but for minor special issuances, your AME can just issue it on the spot if he or she thinks it's not a problem. So you go in for your vision test, you put on your glasses, you do the vision test, and then the AME is just like, okay, your special issuance is you're good, but you have to wear glasses when you fly. But there are more extreme ones that need to be handled by the FAA. And so a really interesting example of this that my brother Matthew showed me was there was this woman pilot who didn't have arms, and so she like outfitted an air coupe so she could fly it completely with her feet, and obviously that required a special issuance. And so her list of restrictions is high, like you have to fly in this particular airplane and nothing else. And maybe there's others, only at daytime. I don't know. But the point is, basically, you build a case about why you can still fly safely under a certain set of circumstances. You present that case to the FAA, and then they either say yes or no and grant you the medical or deny you. And this process, from what I've heard, I've never gone through it, but from what I've heard, it can take a very long time and be expensive. So it's not recommended unless you think you have a really good reason of why you need the medical certificate. If this is your life's dream, is to be an airline pilot, and something that you think is small is preventing you from getting that first class medical, maybe it makes sense. So what do you do if you're hearing this after you failed a medical certificate? You didn't hear all this advice about the preparation. You went into one blind and you failed the exam. What are your options now? So unfortunately, your basic med is out of the picture. You're no longer eligible. You're no longer eligible to fly under a US driver's license as a sport pilot. And so really, your only two options are stop flying, unfortunately, or try to address the problem via one of the two ways we just mentioned. Like, physically address the problem, start working out to improve your blood pressure, get classes, whatever, or try to go for a special issuance. And so, like, I wish there was more that I could offer, but that's kind of it, right? That's why it's so crucial that you don't fail a medical examination. You should only take an exam if you go into it knowing that you're going to pass, right? You already have an idea of what your strengths and weaknesses are, and there's going to be no surprises in the actual exam. One thing that I wanted to mention really quickly that's a little bit controversial about this process is at the beginning I mentioned that one of the areas that they test is for like mental disorders, mental conditions. And so what they're looking for is, do you have a history of mental issues, depression, schizophrenia, whatever mental disorder. Are you taking antidepressants like that? Like, it kind of ties into the medications as well. And this has caused some problems because the FAA historically has been very strict on people with mental disorders should not be able to fly. And there's a good reason for that, right? Especially like if you're going for a first class medical and you'll be carrying hundreds of passengers, you don't want somebody who has a history of depression, right? Because like Who knows what could happen, right? You could be in a dangerous situation. But at the same time, it's created this weird system where pilots are so afraid to like seek out help, like even something as simple as like going to therapy, because they're worried that it's going to be like somehow the FAA is going to find out and it's going to be classified as like depression or a mental disorder, even something like anxiety could possibly be flagged. And so they just flat out won't go get help for anything, which is also not good, right? Like there needs to be some sort of middle ground here. And maybe we'll talk about this in another episode. I think this would be a good one to do with Matthew, because he knows a little bit more about this. But I just wanted to like introduce that topic, that there's this little bit of a controversy over the mental illness aspect of the medical exam. That's very interesting. They also, I know I mentioned this in another podcast, but the show Nathan For You, they have the season about airline pilots, and it talks about this a little bit, even though it's a comedy show. Yeah, I would definitely check that out. But yeah, so I think we've talked about medical certificates enough. Couple last things I want to say before we conclude. One, don't fail a medical exam. That is the biggest takeaway. Two, like I said, I didn't go over some of the small details, like what exactly are they testing for under each one, like how good does your eyesight have to be, what does your blood pressure have to be. You can look that up online in the FARs. This was just like supposed to be an overview, but hopefully, if aviation medical exams stressed you out, hopefully this can help relieve some of that stress and show you that there are ways to fly even if you can't get a medical. And there are ways to know if you're going to fail the exam, so you don't have to go in and just risk it. So yeah, I hope this helps. If you have any questions or comments, definitely let me know. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Wing Wag. If you liked this episode, please consider subscribing. And if you're out flying today, make sure to give somebody a wing wag.